So what happens when a patriot's love for their country seems to slam right into the defense of their faith? We're going to dive into a really fascinating case study from French social media, all based on an analysis by creator named Maji Dukacha. It's about a public figure who's all about national unity until he's put to the test. Okay, so let me introduce you to Ben Le Patriot. He's a French Muslim creator with, get this, hundreds of thousands of followers. His whole public message is about patriotism, coexistence. He's built a huge brand on trying to bridge these divides. And here's where it gets complicated. This is the central question, right? According to Okasha's analysis, why would someone who champions French values, why would he seem to draw this really hard line when it comes to free speech about his own religion? Let's unpack that. All right, first things first, let's get a clearer picture of who we're actually talking about here. What's the public persona of Ben Le Patriot? So we're not talking about some small-time creator. Ben Le Patriot has a serious platform. He's got a massive following on TikTok. He's been on national TV. He even co-founded a whole movement. And his message is always super consistent. Be a proud French patriot and publicly call out anyone who gives your community a bad name. Okay, so now we get to the moment that kicked this whole thing off. It involves another creator, an ex-Muslim named Ali Babal, who gets invited to speak on a major French news channel, CNews. And what happens next? Well, that's where our story really begins. And this right here is the absolute core of the issue. On the left, you've got what Alibaba actually talked about for nearly 15 minutes, a deep dive critique of Islamic texts. But on the right, that's how Ben Le Patriot framed it in his response video. He boiled it all down to a bizarre segment about flatulence. 10 seconds. Seriously, out of a nearly 15-minute theological and philosophical discussion, that's how much time Ali Babal spent on one tiny anecdote about ablutions. And yet, Ben Le Patriot built his entire video takedown on just that little, totally out of context moment. And just look at what got swept under the rug. Ben's video completely sidestepped all of the heavy-hitting topics Alibaba raised, things like the death penalty for leaving Islam. Nope. Instead, he zeroed in on the one and only topic that he could easily make sound ridiculous, completely misrepresenting the entire interview. So you might be wondering, how did he do it? Well, Ukasha's analysis argues this wasn't just some misunderstanding. It was a very deliberate pattern of rhetorical tactics, all designed to just discredit Alibaba. The analysis basically lays out this 4-step takedown playbook. Step 1, isolate a weird clip. Step 2, ridicule the speaker. Shake your head, make faces. Step 3, completely mischaracterize his entire argument. And finally, step 4, diabolize him by comparing him to Hitler. The point here is clear. This was a strategy to attack the person, not engage with the ideas. But the story doesn't end there. It moves to a live debate where Ben was confronted by another creator, Jack LeFou, and this is where Ben's whole philosophy of tolerance was really put to the test. And throughout this debate, you see Ben going back to this one emotional argument, again and again. He says that any criticism of sacred ideas is by definition hurtful, and because it's hurtful, it threatens his goal of living together. But his opponent, Jack LeFou, he comes back with a totally different idea of what coexistence looks like. He argues that real tolerance isn't about liking or accepting other people's ideas. It's about defending their right to express them publicly, even if you find those ideas offensive. That, he says, is basically the cover charge for living in a free society. And this is where it gets really good. Jack sets this simple, elegant little trap. He asks a straightforward question. Is it wise to insult religions? And Ben agrees. No, he says, it is not wise. Boom, there's the pivot. Jack immediately flips Ben's own logic and applies it to a verse in the Quran itself where polytheists are insulted. And this creates a huge logical problem for Ben. Either his standard doesn't apply to his own holy book, or the book itself is unwise. And this is the reaction that gets to the absolute heart of the paradox. When he's faced with a logical challenge using his own religious text, Ben doesn't engage. He just shuts the conversation down, and he reframes a point of logic as a personal, emotional attack. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? What is the paradox at the center of this whole story? At the end of the day, the conclusion of the analysis is pretty clear. Ben Le Patriot's whole vision for living together seems to have one massive condition: that the foundational texts of his religion are completely off limits to public criticism. By saying that intellectual debate is the same as a personal attack, he basically creates a taboo that doesn't apply to any other subject. Now, the analysis doesn't really pass a final judgment on Ben Patriot himself. It's not about that. Instead, it leaves all of us with this really provocative question. For us to truly coexist, where do we draw the line between protecting people's feelings and protecting the freedom to question everything, which is what a secular society is supposed to be built on?